When I received the invitation to present here in Mexico, I went to the web to have an idea of the situation of the obesity prevalence in the country. So obesity here is a significant problem, and in general, it is clear that there is a link with perturbation of glucose stability. Obesity is a well-known risk to develop diabetes. Entonces, la pregunta principal está, ¿por qué ahora somos más obesos en comparación del pasado? It's not easy to answer the question, but the spontaneous answer that the physiologist could give is that, of course, there is a caloric imbalance. Many factors have the potential to influence a positive energy balance, and maybe one major problem of modernity is that all changes that occurred over time are all acting on the same side of the balance. They promote a positive energy balance. So, in the context of this meeting, the main question is insufficient dairy intake or yogurt intake can be part of the problem? And is it also possible that adequate yogurt intake be at least partly a factor in the solution? The story related to dairy intake, energy balance, obesity proneness, and metabolic health has begun more than 35 years ago, when Professor McCarran used the large data bank of the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey to look at the profile of metabolic health in relation to calcium intake. And one major finding in his investigation was the trend towards lower calcium consumption in hypertensive individuals. Draw your attention on this bar. So this one at the extreme, indicating that in the upper centile group of body weight, in the distribution of the cohort, there was a lower calcium intake. Of course, it's not a strong proof of concept to argue in favor of a link between calcium intake and the proneness to overweight, but that was the beginning of the story. And several years after, Jerry Reven described for the first time a metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome was a matter of interest for investigators being interested by calcium-related research and dairy-related research. And in one of these studies, a very well-cited study by Pereira, it was found that when they were comparing high dairy consumers to low dairy consumers, the incidence of problems of glucose homeostasis and dyslipidemia was greater in low dairy consumers. Only in obese individuals, indicating that dairy, at least in this study, was making a difference for the most vulnerable individuals. If we are here today, at least to talk about obesity, it is certainly in part because of the very valuable contribution of Professor Michael Zemel of the University of Tennessee, who really demonstrated an impact of variations in calcium intake on the proneness to overweight. The Zemel team reported for the first time a study in human testing the impact of a yogurt supplementation on body fat over a year of supplementation. And in this case, yogurt was mostly considered as a calcium vehicle. Here, as you can see on this slide, the control subjects, who were African American individuals, had, after a year, a difference of 5 kilos of body fat compared to those who were receiving the yogurt supplementation. Clinical trials are needed, and again, that was the merit of the group of Professor Zemel to provide the first data being obtained in the context of a clinical trial being specifically designed to look at the impact of a calcium supplementation or a dairy supplementation in the context of a weight-reducing program in obese individuals. The main point on which I wish to focus is number one. They selected low calcium consumers. I mean individuals being at greater risk to suffer from a deficiency and eventually display metabolic alterations resulting from the inadequate mineral intake. The subjects were tested under nutritional supervision, aiming at a caloric deficit, 500 kcal per day. The results are convincing. Without no surprise, every group lost a significant amount of body weight. But this weight loss was greater in the calcium supplemented group, and it was even greater in the dairy supplemented group, leading to the suggestion that there is something in dairy, in addition to the calcium supplementation, that has the possibility to influence energy balance, maybe energy intake. The Zemel group came back with another study, again with the calcium supplementation. That was, in this case, a yogurt supplementation, providing a calcium supplement of a little bit more than 1,000 milligrams per day. And again, it was tested in obese individuals. It was tested under conditions of dietary restriction. And you see that when we consider the change in central body fat, trunk body fat, the loss was more pronounced in the yogurt supplemented group compared to the control group. The same finding for the change in the waist circumference. An investigator in Philadelphia was proposing a calcium-specific appetite control. Michael Tordoff proposed a theory based on fluctuations of calcium intake that was basically demonstrated in animals. So the main observation was that in calcium-deprived individual, there is a spontaneous increase in food intake when they recover free access to food. We perform a first clinical trial in obese women, very low calcium consumers, 500 to 600 milligrams per day, who were subjected to a dietary supervision for 15 weeks. You see the weight and fat loss, a small fat loss in control individuals receiving a placebo instead of a calcium plus vitamin D supplementation in the experimental group. In fact, weight loss and fat loss was about 4 times greater in individuals being supplemented. We also had the ambition to prepare a super yogurt, a yogurt that would be high in calcium, high in protein, and also that would be made optimal regarding the food matrix. So we incorporated dietary fibers in an experimental yogurt, and we also changed the ratio of dairy proteins. We tried to test the yogurt under free living conditions. In fact, the results were convincing because the 2 yogurts had about the same impact on appetite sensations. The degree of appreciation was about the same, acceptable, pleasant, but the difference in subsequent energy intake at lunchtime was significantly different, almost 200 kilocalories of difference following the super yogurt. Our colleagues of the Harvard School of Public Health also checked yogurt and documented interesting aspects by using their epidemiological techniques of investigation. Several years ago, they first demonstrated that individuals who were high dairy consumers in high school at a lower risk, 38%, for developing type 2 diabetes as adults. More recently, this group provided a classical demonstration that will probably be highly cited too. They performed a large meta-analysis in the attempt to associate the risk to develop diabetes with the consumption of different foods. And when they were looking at the dairy diabetes association, there was no significant relationship. When they were specifically focusing on yogurt intake, so then they saw a difference of 18% of lower risk of diabetes when there was 1 serving of yogurt per day. It is also relevant to talk about some concomitant beneficial effects of yogurt consumption. And here the question is it possible that the apparent benefits of yogurt be related to the global lifestyle profile of people? The first indicator is the possibility that the yogurt consumer has a global better diet quality compared to a non-consumer. We documented this issue first by looking at the profile, the content, the nutrient composition of a standardized portion of yogurt, which is a good contributor of some nutrients that I describe in this presentation as being related to appetite control, energy balance, and body weight stability. And to further document this issue, we look at the intake of some nutrients which are not contained in yogurt, or for which yogurt is a very low source, and we compare the intake of these nutrients between the yogurt consumers and non-consumers. So, and again, you see a difference in pantothenic acid, folic acid, iron intake, manganese, copper, for which yogurt is not a good source. So suggesting that the global food intake profile of yogurt consumers is maybe better. This slide refers to our most recent research contribution in the field of yogurt study. We used the data of the Quebec family study to look at the profile of yogurt consumers and non-consumers. So we saw that the glucose tolerance and the insulin response to a glucose load was significantly different, lower for yogurt consumers versus non-consumers, and the significant difference persisted after statistical adjustment for age, diet quality, physical activity participation, and percent body fat. We observed that over time, percent body fat tends to decrease in yogurt consumers versus a trend towards an increase in yogurt non-consumers. And again, there is the statistical significance remains when adjusting for age and the nutrient-rich factor. So I will finish by talking just a little bit about the palatability dilemma. I don't know if you are like me. When there are foods that I don't like, I don't consume them. Is it a problem to add a little bit of sugar in yogurt? This was recently studied by our colleagues from the University of Toronto, the group of Professor Harvey Anderson. They measured the short-term impact of 3 yogurts, so plain yogurt with honey, and strawberry yogurt. So on the left side of the slide, without any surprise, at least in concordance with my food preference, the strawberry yogurt was more palatable compared to the natural yogurt. But when we look at the impact of the plasma glucose response to sweetened yogurt, there was no difference. And finally, they also focused on subsequent energy intake. So once again, there was no difference. So the take-home message in this case is that there was no detrimental effect of yogurt sweetening on postprandial glycemia as well as subsequent energy intake. El mensaje en ese caso yo creo que yogurt is a healthy food and should be part of a healthy diet. Muchas gracias para vuestra atención.